Welcome out to another episode of It's All Been Checked Before. This time, evolution. Just as we've evolved, this series is evolving. Season 3 premiere, evolution. We're going to talk about it here. Speaking of evolution, help us continue to evolve. Hey, we got a Facebook page. It's All Been Checked Before. Go find it. Engage with us there. Talk to us there. Tell us what we're doing right. Tell us what we're doing wrong. Just talk to us. Let's talk Trek. Let's do it there. It's one of the great places. Come find us there. Talk to us there. Another place, patreon.com/IABD. Get those extra content. Get extra features. Mere few bucks a month. You can do it. Just like the few bucks that they spent on this. Evolution on It's All Been Trekked Before.
Welcome out to another episode of It's All Been Trekked Before. We are back for a third season, or is it the 8th season? I can't remember. The third season of Next Gen.
Yes.
Your regular hosts have all returned.
This is Steven.
And Keith.
Jimmy-Jerome and Dr. Crusher. She's back. We'll get to her in a minute. First impressions of evolution.
I would, to quote our friend of the show, C.K. Bergeson, or to use the term he coined, it was aggressively okay.
I felt like there were a lot of good concepts. Not sure they fully explored them.
That's also correct.
It was a little boring.
Yes.
Wow.
Scott Grimes made a cameo, though, from the Orville.
Yeah.
What?
Where was he in the episode?
I don't know either, but when I was looking at the cast list, I saw it, and I was like, oh, yeah. Because I thought we had talked about him being...
Oh, he's
Wesley's
one of the
friend.
Kids that Wesley hangs out with in the end. And he's in sick bay when the girl's getting checked out.
Oh, okay.
Keith, your first impressions.
Oh, I guess I liked it more than you guys, but no, I don't know.
It had one of those concepts I thought you would like.
I did and I didn't. I think some of it was the execution. I wonder how much nanite technology had come up by then. The biggest thing I had a problem with when I realized it was I was almost jokingly thinking in my head, what, he just had like an open jar of them? And apparently
he fell asleep.
Yeah, I don't think he would keep them in a jar of that type that would just kind of,
They reminded me of the spiders from Tron.
It felt like they were trying to get some of the high concept stuff, similar to how they did the Child for last year's premiere, but it just wasn't there. And it surprises me because it was written by Michael Piller, who's going to go on to become one of the big producer, showrunner of that era of Star Trek. He was the writer of Insurrection, but he was also a writer for DS9 and Voyager after Next Gen and a producer. He was a co-creator of Voyager and DS9. So Michael Piller is big name for Star Trek. And this was his first script for them. He also wrote The Best of Both Worlds, which is the end of this season, beginning of next, which is amazing. And the 2-part unification with Spock. So he's got some great stuff coming up.
Okay.
it seemed to be about welcoming back Beverly Crusher
to
some extent, and also leaning into Wesley coming of age to some extent, and also ushering in those types of storylines where it's about leaning into him being this gifted kid that's got all these things to do.
Kind of like that, but I also felt it was less of a reset than the season 2 premiere. Season 2 premiere felt very much like they were resetting everything, but this one just felt like everything was kind of continuing to me.
I'm not sure I understand. What should they have done differently then?
So I guess with season 2, when they started, Worf and Geordi were in new positions and everything, and so it felt very much like a new. And Crusher was back, but while they did acknowledge she'd been gone, part of it was also like, she's just totally back to being with the crew, and it's like she never left. She never really missed a beat, other than her motherly relationship with Wesley. So I don't know. It didn't feel as much like a season premiere as I expected. Although we will make up for that at the end of this season, the beginning of next, with what might be the best 2 episodes of Next Gen. So
on that subject, I thought it was pretty funny that she was asking Picard about her son in the sense of like, what's he been doing? And it's almost like Picard had that look on his face like he was trying to remember past episodes. Like, was she there for the Dauphine?
Crusher wasn't, no.
Yeah, okay. So it was like, did he fall in love? It's like, wait.
That's what I thought of, especially since I just listened to our Dauphine episode.
I thought Picard probably remembered that, but was not about to tell her about it. So
right.
He should have sat her down in front of a screen like they did Riker in the pilot. And be like, this, and then they play clips.
That's what I was going to say. This is the spot for some clips.
Oh, thank God they didn't.
No,
Yeah, the conversation with Picard was pretty awkward, I thought it was. I'm glad they reminded us that Wesley's 17 because I can't remember how old he was.
Yeah.
Sometimes he seems older.
I did like that talk, even though it was awkward.
Well, the whole thing about he should be getting into trouble. We got into trouble at that age, and I was totally a Wesley, where I was the one on the straight and narrow. Not that I had friends, I hung out with them, and I did social things, but very much like my friends were teaching me to cuss as a senior in high school. My mom was like, it's about time somebody corrupts them a little bit.
I had the same thought, which was, is it necessary? Because I didn't usually get in trouble. Mm-hmm. And the only time I could think of I got in trouble was when I was 17, was with girls. And that was just always being out late because, hey, I'm out with a girl. I'm not going home early.
Sure.
And that wasn't that, even that wasn't that much. But I thought the same thing. Is trouble a necessary thing you have to do? I don't think it is it?
I don't know.
I mean, I guess if the concern is, and she says it, I think, like, does he have friends? Has he been in love or whatever? I guess those make sense, but.
And yeah, he does. We just didn't. I mean, the audience isn't really privy to that until Crusher sees it, which I liked because it made you think that she was right. He doesn't have a social life. And then you see, no, he really does.
He goes on those walks with Riker.
Oh, well, when she asked if he had friends, my first thought was Riker.
That was mine too.
I wanted her to say, his own age.
I hadn't really thought of it in that sense, but that kind of contributes to how I was feeling about the doctor's the scientist, this episode's Commodore, when he's taking a liking to Wesley so quickly. And it's a shame that I'll take responsibility for it, but the idea of this is the reaction I have immediately, that kind of visceral kind of, is he up to something? Is this appropriate? This kind of relationship. And it's innocent enough, and they eventually get to why he would probably feel some sort of affinity toward Wesley. And it was in that same subject of him sort of also assuming that Wesley wouldn't have a life. Even from the audience perspective, as you were saying, they were showing us that Wesley didn't seem to think that he did either. They just kind of snuck that in at the end in 10 forward with the other kids showing up suddenly.
So do you feel like that doesn't make sense that he was hanging out with the other kids?
No, the way that they were showing us everything painted a certain picture that was just sort of abruptly shattered at the end.
And I like that.
Yeah,
we
I'm
only
not sure
ever
if it's
get to
realistic
see
or not.
a portion of these people's lives.
Right.
I like that we made an assumption, then they showed us our assumptions were wrong.
Yeah. No, I agree with that.
I actually kind of liked the starting with Wesley asleep in the lab, even though it felt like an 80s movie move. Being late for shift, my first thought was Marty McFly at the beginning of Back to the Future when he's oversleeping. But it bothered me when Riker was like, you forget to set your alarm, and Wesley's like, yeah. And I'm like, at this point, shouldn't alarms be automated? Like, the ship's computer knows when he's scheduled for a shift.
Right.
It should all happen automatically.
This is before, electronic day planners and so forth, right? I mean,
sure.
So it's kind of funny you think about those kinds of bits of technology that people take for granted they wouldn't have thought would even exist then or conceive of yet.
Well, having to set an alarm on a daily basis is long in the past. Like my phone is set for just a Monday through Friday alarm or whatever,
So the whole 80s movie opening thing, just to go back to that for a moment, that made me start thinking about how the fan base hatred would start to come into play eventually. I didn't really feel that way then. And even now, looking back, I think we agree that I think some of it was overblown, but I can understand. It still makes me look for what might have made people start to resent him. And I think this was kind of the start of that, or not the start, but I'm saying this is a good example of how it frames an episode to be about him in a certain way that people might.
Yeah, I think it started earlier than this, but I think this was peak Wesley hate. I mean, he's the one that caused all the trouble, even though nobody got mad at him and there were no consequences. And then he helped save the ship from the disaster he created. So
sort of. Yeah,
in a way.
Well, if he'd come clean sooner and made the correlation sooner, he could have helped.
That's the 17-year-old, though. Sure. So I kind of excuse it, even though I feel like sometimes we think of Wesley as older than he is, as I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
And a 17-year-old that caused major trouble, he's not going to want to tell people and face those consequences. As mature as Wesley is.
Most adults don't either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did think the one way this felt like a season premiere was there was extra exposition that we maybe wouldn't have gotten in normal episodes. of reminding us where was Beverly, and she was at Starfleet Medical for a year, and who's Wesley, and what's his relationship to the show. Like, they really went out of their way, and some of that they gave to Crusher, and some of it they gave to Paul Stubbs, their guest star, but it felt very exposition-y. The other thing I was looking for was rank, because some of the ranks changed from season 1 to 2, and I was looking again. I did think it's pretty weird that Crusher was head of Starfleet Medical, but she came back with the same rank she left with, still a commander. They didn't promote her to captain to head Starfleet Medical. I did notice that Geordi got promoted. He's now lieutenant commander instead of just a lieutenant. So he's been promoted 2 seasons in a row at the start. We just didn't see it happen. And Worf is
going places.
Worf is now a full lieutenant instead of a lieutenant junior grade. So Worf and Geordi both got promoted between seasons again.
You saw that in Worf's uniform?
Last season, he just got a different job. But now they both get... But Geordi was upped in rank and got a different job, and now they both upped in rank.
You saw that just by the uniforms?
Yeah, I looked at the pips on the collar.
Man.
But I'm pretty sure nobody else gets promoted for the rest of the series. So it's weird that they did these promotions early on multiple times. I think the next promotion we see is in Star Trek Generations, the movie, when Worf gets promoted to lieutenant commander.
This may not be a season premiere thing, but I thought the opening effects were really good. That opening effects shot. So I didn't know if there was more money this season.
Probably. It was a very successful show.
Yeah. So because I thought the effects looked really good, especially that opening shot of as the Enterprise is approaching not the Nova, but whatever was going on there.
The binary star.
That's it. Yeah. I thought that was really, really cool.
I thought you meant in the opening credits.
The opening credits looked upgraded to me too, but I was wondering if that was true or not.
I wrote that down too. I thought those looked different.
I'll need to watch next time.
I don't know if it was new or I just thought it was new because it's been a while since we watched an episode.
I always let it play, but I don't know that I always watch it.
Yeah, me too.
So
did you recognize the main guest star, Dr. Paul Stubbs, played by
Ken? I did right away. I was like, well, I knew him. I felt ashamed that I didn't know why I knew him right away.
You didn't know why you knew him right away?
No.
I guess I've been rewatching Scrubs.
That's why I felt so much shame when
I really had to think about it too, and I'm proud of myself that I could remember it without having to look it up, because it was just like, he looks so familiar. Something's going on. What is it? I can't place it. Then there's something about expression or something about the way he said something. It was like, oh.
I mean, even if I hadn't been watching Scrubs, which I just watched an episode yesterday, and I watched this today, I think I still would have thought of it. I mean, I've seen every episode, so I think I would have gotten it, but because it's so fresh. What I didn't realize on Scrubs, because he's so much older, even it's like 15, 20 years later, is he has such a baby face in this episode.
Yeah.
In a way that doesn't come through when he gets old. And that really sold home the comparison they made, that he was kind of a grown-up version of Wesley, that he was the child prodigy, the wonderkind, which he wasn't sure Wesley knew what that was, which felt more like the audience wouldn't have known. Of course, Wesley knew.
I really liked his stuff about, the worst thing is that essentially have all that potential thrust upon you. Is
the potential becomes your worst enemy or something to that effect.
Yeah, I thought that was some really good stuff. And it didn't seem preachy or whatever. It just seemed like that's just the way that guy talked. As annoyed as I was with him for a lot, that character for a lot of the episode, I thought early on there were some good revelations.
Well, I can relate to that sort of thing, actually. Yeah. I started thinking about that when those memes would come up. I was in like the gifted program through elementary and junior high and high school. Skipped a grade back when I was in kindergarten. Hasn't gone all that great.
I did too. Me too. And it's like, okay, well, good job.
I'm supposed to be in the sciences or something, or I'm supposed to be curing something.
Yeah, I think the same thing. Well, not that I should be in the sciences. Now I think, science would have been cool, but I should have decided that a long time ago.
Yeah.
I liked the comparison, and I liked that character. Even when he was acting in a frustrating way, I felt like I understood the character.
Yeah.
And could see, not necessarily taking the same actions he did, but understanding why he took them. It was easier not to get upset with him when I could understand what he was doing.
Definitely. On that subject, it was more difficult for me to get on board with the way the Prime Directive was being applied. And again, in reference to these, the nanites in this case too, it actually made me have to really kind of pause and take a breath and think about that. Like, how would I feel about that? And it's like, I have to agree with the logic of what they're saying and how that's applied in most other situations, but it really did feel like I was kind of with the doctor on that. Like, let's go. Come on. This amounts to him spilling something into a computer. Let's vacuum it out and go, kind of.
But what was the Prime Directive part of this story?
Well, it wasn't explicitly stated, but Picard was treating them as sentient life forms.
Right, which isn't the Prime Directive, because the Prime Directive's interfering with development.
Oh.
Well, and they weren't trying to interfere. They were just trying not to commit genocide.
I thought that was a tenet of it to some extent. There's something about, I guess Prime would have to, that does imply only one. But I swear there was some sort of, it's like the laws of robotics or something. They have this kind of list of things they can't do.
I just thought, like, if there's life there, they're not going to destroy it. Because that's a primary mission, is to seek out new life and new civilizations.
Well, see, you just said like a primary mission, something. I swear
That's
to God
true.
that there had to be some
they
kind of.
They did talk about that.
Yeah.
And which, I'll wrap all three of these things together. I felt like you, Keith, and Dr. Stubbs, that I was like, come on, let's move on. Let's get rid of these things, move on. But then I thought, well, we've done this before. Yeah, we had the lights. I don't know if that's season 1 or 2, where it's like, oh, the lights are a life form. We can't destroy them, all that stuff. And that's my own humanoid-centered, carbon-based life form-centric.
And that's why the Enterprise crew are better than us.
Yeah, exactly, absolutely. That part just made me think it's not that interesting to me. But I also kind of agree with Stubbs, but I get why they did what they did. But.
Well, they're better than us in this episode.
Yes.
Yeah,
I feel like if we dig, there's got to be something. Or,
I think overall the Enterprise crew is better than us, though.
Yes.
Overall.
What I mean is the writers wrote it a different way in some other episode, maybe.
Fashion?
Yeah. Fashion.
Worf got a new wig.
Yeah, you're right. He did look different. And am I wrong? The uniforms were a little different, weren't they?
I thought so. They looked higher quality. They had 3 panels distinctly across the chest instead of like one thin piece of fabric. Crusher's coat was a thick material.
Yeah.
It wasn't just a lab coat material.
It all looked a little puffier, for lack of a better word. I know it was late 80s, so.
And I think they did a really good job of dressing Stubbs like an overgrown child.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. 2 fashion notes. One is, the second one may not really be a fashion note, but it kind of plays into it. I wrote Crusher's back, which we mentioned earlier. Her hair, the curls, great. The front bang swoopy thing, didn't care for. I thought, wow, Deanna Troi has lost a lot of weight. I'm like, am I just imagining that? So I did a little research, and so I found an interview with her and Michael Dorn from, this is 2014. This is a BuzzFeed interview with the two of them. And so the third question is, why did Troi have so many costumes? And she said, basically the reason I wasn't in the spacesuit when we started was because I was too fat and it just didn't look good. And then Gene decided if I wasn't going to be wearing the spacesuit, and I was a counselor, it would put people at their ease if I was wearing regular clothes and not a military uniform. Then Michael Dorn says, and then you got skinny. And then she says, and then I got skinny and I could wear anything. So.
Yeah, I didn't think she was ever fat, but.
Oh, God, no. No, she's always looked great. I just thought she looked skinnier, for lack of a better term.
Early in the episode, when they get attacked, everybody goes flying. Stubbs gets like slammed to the wall and rolls around.
Yeah.
Nobody goes to check on him until late, like things calm down. And I'm like, certainly somebody on the bridge could spare a moment to make sure he's not like bleeding from a head wound, right?
Right. I thought there was something else wrong with him. And so, to your point, I thought people should have like, hey, man, what's wrong with you? Are you okay? We got to get you to sick bay.
I feel like that should have been Riker's job. Picard was handling the situation. And Riker's the one that checked on him, but later and cradled his head gently. And laid him back on his back. But I like that they trusted the computer implicitly about the Borg attacking, even though they didn't see the Borg.
Right.
I'm just like, oh, of course. The view screen's not foolproof at all. And you're in space. You got to rely on your sensors.
My thought was like, oh, is this a Borg episode? And then it wasn't. But so they had me believe it too. The computer I had trust in the computer as well.
Were you disappointed it didn't end up being a Borg episode?
I was, yeah. I was, especially the way it played out. I did like then when the computer started losing it, it was making those 3D chess references. Yeah. Because that was one part I had to rewind. One, there were times I was like, oh, I'm looking this up, and I'm like, oh, I got to rewind. And there were other times I was watching it very late the other night, and I was like, I was getting very sleepy and wasn't paying good enough attention, so I had to rewind. So
don't worry, the next time the Borg come back, you're going to get your fill of Borg.
Okay.
And it will be this season, but I think you have to wait till the end of the season.
I can't remember if it's during that. They do the evasive maneuvers, and I think Riker says 2.75 Mark III. I think we've talked about this before. Does anyone have any idea what that means?
Somebody does. I don't.
Isn't that just like a directional coordinate, like a vector, as far as sort of say like 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock, but like in a three-dimensional?
I guess it's like the sea stuff, like hard turn, a stern bow. Somebody please write in and save me from this. In my mind, it's easier to see a sea captain be like, all right, do this and move over there. I'm looking at that spot. I'm giving you nautical terms. I don't have any gauge for what that mark would be. And
well, yeah, I mean, I don't know what it would translate to exactly,
right.
But I can imagine that you'd have like a globe of coordinates around the ship to indicate something other than north or south, because there is no such thing. You would have to actually use a numeric coordinate.
I guess that thing we talk about all the time, not in a linear way necessarily. Definitely mean a dip or this or that. It might have been Crusher used the term nonchalance as a noun, which I enjoyed. Generally, you think of someone being described as nonchalant.
Yeah.
They said something about so-and-so's nonchalance.
The doctor, his practiced demeanor and so forth.
Yeah. So I like that. I just had to stop. I was like, I'd never heard it used that way. So I enjoyed that.
So when Picard states, their policy of how to deal with sentient life forms when they encounter them, especially when they show up in the ship, as they have a few times now. I mean, is there anything that formally directs them to do that, or is it his own preference, or is this supposed to be like a statement on society as a whole as far as it's come?
I think it's societal values was my impression. Before we get away from the Borg, though, it occurred to me that Wesley seemed to build basically the Borg. They're a hive mind, the nanos. It's a new civilization, and they clearly can single out people that threaten them because they go after Stubbs. But they also leave you alone if you're not threatening them. It feels like he built the Borg.
Does he call himself Frankenstein?
No, Guinan calls him Frankenstein, which I thought was a wonderful reference.
Yeah. I usually bust on them for making 700-year-old references, but that one I was okay with.
Oh, they're going to know who Frankenstein is in 300 years, 400 years.
I feel like they will. I think.
Something just to...
They'll still call him Frankenstein, even though it's actually Frankenstein's monster.
The whole thing about the Borg and the relation to it, it never occurred to me that, let's say that the reason why the computer thought the Borg was attacking is because the signature of them were similar enough to these nanites in the computer. They've now been dropped off onto a planet. Who's to say that didn't, there's some sort of time travel thing involved where they ended up being the progenitors to the Borg.
Huh.
I mean, there's got to be some novel that deals with that, but I don't think we ever revisit this planet, which is a shame because I would like to see. I mean, I feel like that would make a good film now.
That's my alternate episode. Yeah. Was actually Return to the New Planet, which again is more of a sequel, but still that's my alternate. And is it now with Keith saying that it makes me think either it goes that route, or I don't know why we're thinking. I just don't care for these creatures. So I do think they're going to be negative, and I think when they go back, they're like, or whatever. So one of the people that got hurt in the sick bay will be there, and they'll realize it's the nanites. Nanites! Oh no! And they'll go to run, and then the nanites will be like, "Oh, we got you!" And then they'll be like, "Wesley Crusher created us and left us here alone
with a book about Chicago mobs."
That was my other thought too.
Wait,
my alternate episode is they mention there hasn't been a system-wide starship failure in 79 years. I want to see the last one.
Yeah, that's a good one too.
Star Trek V: The Undiscovered Country.
Yeah.
I would have preferred it be an original series episode and they set it back longer, but
the
nanites being upset that they were left on that planet.
Yeah.
They mentioned Wesley. You mean Captain Crusher? Captain Crusher.
Captain. I don't think Wesley needed to explain to Guinan what nanobites are. I feel like we all, in this century, most people know what nanobites are, and by then...
nanites.
Whatever. And by then, somebody who's been alive for centuries would know and not need to have explained.
Yeah, I couldn't figure out Stubbs' overall. Like he seemed like he was a brilliant guy, but sometimes they played it up like he was out of touch. I thought so. Maybe that is why Wesley was like, maybe I should explain this to you.
Well, no, he explained him to Guinan.
Guinan.
Oh, that's right. Never mind. Sorry.
No, but let's go back that for a moment. This is something I guess we didn't really explore when I first mentioned it. Mm-hmm. As far as fiction or science fiction, in the late 80s, I don't remember how many times nanites have been brought up. By now, it feels like it's come up a lot. I don't know if they would have assumed that those things were even around then.
I mean, they made a lot of extension of science of things that were being worked on and they thought in the future. To ignore nanites, to not assume that they're going to be part of the future at this point, that they're still experimental, seems a little odd. I mean,
that's my point, though. The 80s, who knows? It's just...
Yeah. So Guinan, the mystery continues to deepen. She references her husbands in this episode. Mm-hmm. And she also says she had a lot of children.
Yeah.
And it took her several hundred years to get one of her sons in line. So clearly there's more story there we haven't explored. It does make me wonder how old she is, because we do get to see her about 100 years prior to this at one point, but I don't think we ever go any further back than that. So
do you really not know offhand? Because that actually surprises me a bit.
No, I don't know offhand. I guess I was under the impression that she wasn't that old when we see her 100 years before this, like maybe a couple hundred years old. But it sounds more like she might be close to a millennia. I don't know.
Yeah, I really have no idea, or I really don't remember at all, like how much more they do with all these hints, because these are just, it feels like I'm hearing them for the first time every time now.
I feel like the most we get about her is Star Trek Generations. And so that's where I keep going back as a touch point.
Right.
The first film. Memory Alpha said she was married 23 times. And it does say children a lot.
You have to, I mean, if you think about what it would be like to be a species that with that kind of longevity, I mean, what would marriage even mean?
Does that mean she might have been widowed 22 times? Or 23 times?
I don't know if she was widowed or what. I get the impression that, when we see Guinan 100 years before this, she is a refugee, as Keith and I had mentioned in a previous episode last season, and her people are scattered, and they've lost their home world, and it's like the survivors of the race. So I get the impression that a lot of these people probably are dead. StarTrek.com says she's over 600 years old. And she hid out on Earth in the 1800s, which I do think we see in a Next Gen episode. So she's at least that old. I'm pretty sure now that I'm thinking about I don't think I've seen it, but I think there's a time travel episode Next Gen where they find a younger version of her on Earth in the contemporary of Mark Twain. So, yeah, there's... I don't know. I feel like they never really fully explain Guinan and how all that works and why she would be on Earth in the 1800s when she's back on her home world to be fleeing, the massacre hundreds of years later. Who knows? But I guess aliens have been visiting us.
It's true.
Aha! I knew it. Wait.
The Area 51 in Roswell gets explained in Deep Space Nine, so we'll see.
Wow.
We also mentioned in an episode last season that we thought it was odd 10 Forward was empty twice in the same episode. But in this episode, they explained 10 Forward as being empty because it's red alert and everybody's supposed to be in their quarters. So now I'm thinking that's probably the case in last season's episode as well.
Did we ever talk about the idea that there would have to have times where it's closed for cleaning or something, or given?
That was our hypothesis. But the episode last season where we were talking about it was the one with the Borg and Q. So it makes sense to me they stayed under alert and kept everybody in their quarters in that episode.
Yeah.
I feel like they examined this on the Orville, but if you're in there and you're just tying one on and then a red alert happens, I guess you just gotta...
Well, if they're drinking synthol, which they do a lot in Next Gen, they can just decide not to be drunk anymore and they're good.
Oh, that's right.
God, that is so weird.
It is. Otherwise, somebody else has got to cover your duty station. Picard probably doesn't get drunk for that reason. But Riker's come to the bridge tipsy.
Right. Think about it. I mean, how would they do that? Would that be nanites? I mean, if somebody wanted to do synthol in real life, how would that even work? It would have to be absolutely
no idea.
That'd be like a smart app. You'd actually have to have some sort of computer component to it, wouldn't it? I mean,
it's almost, to me, I always thought of it like a placebo. Like they know they're just letting themselves feel drunk, but they can wipe it out because they realize, it's not real. I don't know. What do you think of the traps Wesley sets for the nanites? They look like mouse traps.
I thought the same thing.
Would you say that? Oh, yeah. I thought like maybe Roach Motels or those little Sonic traps. You're like, go away.
I can't find a reason to get upset and say it wouldn't work. And yet it feels very odd.
It implies there would have to be some sort of bait that they would want, or some sort of attractant or a magnet or something, right? But that goes
would definitely be emitting some type of signal that would attract them for sure.
But that goes along with my problem with him having like a jar that is openable, like you can unscrew the lid and have microscopic objects that would stay in it like that, as opposed to like a vial that you would have to keep injecting or pulling.
I do wonder why 10 forward would be a good place to set the trap, though. You'd think like a computer room might be better.
Maybe he's been spreading them throughout the ship or something, and
doesn't seem like he has that many. Stars and Stripes forever. I know that's probably not under copyright. That's why they used it, but I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I wrote down Sousa, and sure enough, they knew who Sousa was. I thought it was interesting that Sousa, they had baseball. It was like a very Americana section there.
But they did establish that baseball had died out, even though apparently Wesley's father still taught him about baseball. And I like that they mentioned it was abandoned for impatience, because that's basically what's going on right now. Like people are losing interest because it's not as exciting as football where you slam into one another.
Yeah.
Wait, did they say that? I missed that.
Yeah, that's what Dr. Paul Stubbs said. It was because of impatience that they abandoned it.
That's hilarious.
He
also said it was from the Americas. He didn't say from the United States.
He did, which I thought was really cool. I thought that made a lot of sense. And he did sound like one of those people like, well, I love baseball because, it's so, he didn't say this specifically, but, it takes its time. It's, it could go for the game at the same time. This could run forever, where not like these other things. And then he mentioned that he watches it in his mind or whatever.
Just by thinking through stats. And then we see him do it later in the episode.
I was just like, you could play Stratomatic or fantasy baseball. You could actually play games, but
I think it's one of those genius level things where you want to do it in your head instead of
I guess you could do that. I guess so.
It's a show not tell by telling in a way.
Yeah, you're right. Is it Wesley who says I always get an A?
Yes.
Yeah.
Which I loved, and when he
doesn't say it braggy. He just says it so nonchalantly, like
It's almost
your grades.
No, he does it with nonchalance. I before he said it, I thought the same thing. Was like, well, he always gets an A, and this goes back to what Keith and I were talking about. I used to say that a long time ago too. Like,
I certainly didn't.
I'm getting an A.
No,
a long time ago.
I was in the gifted program in elementary school, but I never skipped a grade like you smarties. So
my mom didn't want me to because she thought I was already socially not doing a good job, and she was like.
That wasn't the source of any of my social problems that I can really think of. I mean, it wasn't that I had too much trouble blending in with people who were older. It was just a host of other things. No, I did okay for the most part. I think there was a certain point in elementary where I stopped getting good grades, and it just never really came back. And that's for other reasons too, I think. Just concentration issues, as you might have noticed. At some point.
What? Speaking of, grades and slipping and whatever, why did nobody get mad at Wesley? I feel like
I thought that was weird too.
In the earlier seasons, we would have seen him get yelled at first, and then they'll be okay with it.
Yeah.
Nobody seemed the least bit upset with him for letting those nanites escape.
Yeah, I thought that was weird. Like, were they just so impressed that he developed them? I
don't know. And we never heard, but I assume he got an A.
Yeah.
I mean, he built a whole civilization.
Yeah.
That does seem a little bit like overkill, perhaps overachieving.
It was Sims before, not before Sims.
After Sims.
Sims before Sims, and then what he did was after Sims. What the episode was before Sims, right?
Yeah,
that is correct.
Just before Sims.
I also wanted to comment on the statement that he made. I always get an A. It was almost like he was I felt like he was saying like he was disappointed or bored even, or just sort of like sad that he can't seem to help but get an A.
Oh, I just took it as like, no, I'm not worried about that.
Yeah.
A lot of like smart references in this episode. We talked about Frankenstein. They also referenced Gulliver's Travels and the Lily.
Yeah. That one, I for whatever reason, when I'm usually I don't like these old references. I like that one too, for whatever reason I did.
Well, I feel like Gulliver's Travels and Frankenstein are already considered classics and are the type of volume that'll still be around. Yeah, like when they reference Shakespeare, you're like, of course they still have Shakespeare.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
I wish they'd throw in a couple Harry Potter references here and there, but
that's probably wishing for too much right now.
But then now she hates trans people, so she'll probably get canceled.
Right.
When the power went off on the bridge, everything was still flickering on and off. Like they didn't actually shut power off to the bridge.
Well, it's sort of like they were saber rattling. The idea of like, look what we're doing to you. Well, A, to demonstrate to the audience that something is happening, and B, it could be interpreted as being a menacing gesture to say that we're not happy with what you just did. We're gonna get you. It's like, everything's fine now.
To me, it was probably like the director thought, oh, it's boring to just have everything go into darkness. Let's make it visually interesting. Which makes sense for television, but not necessarily for the story. It was directed by Winrich Kolbe. This was the 4th episode he directed. He did Pen Pals, which I guess was kind of visually interesting. A couple other ones. He's got way more episodes coming up that he's directing, including the series finale. So he'll be with us for a while. If it is a he, I'm assuming. I don't know. When we went to the computer, speaking of bad design, when we went to the computer core room, there were multiple ladders right next to one another to climb down in. And also, that's not very handicap accessible.
No.
You should just have a door you can walk through.
Maybe they just use a teleporter or something, or a transporter. Yeah.
That could work. Why didn't they leave the bridge when it filled up with deadly smoke?
It seemed like there wasn't anywhere else to go, or like it was. I think we were supposed to assume that was. What I'm saying is that it seemed like they were trying to imply that it was the entire ship that they were doing that to.
That's actually what I thought.
Oh, I thought he was just gassing the bridge.
I thought it was the whole ship. Yeah.
They left one room and went to there, and it was also there. It was like, do you smell blah, blah, blah?
They smelled it in Picard's office, which is right off the bridge. Oh. They only told Geordi to clear out the air on the bridge.
Okay, no, that makes sense too. But also that goes back to the whole. It seems like they might have understood by that point that that's where the power structure was, or that was where the people were that were making the decisions.
Important people.
I get that, but if I'm choking on poison gas, I'm going to step out of the room while we solve this. And it was very convenient they had gamma pulse generators at the ready. They didn't have to do anything to be able to flood the ship with gamma radiation. Yeah. Is it common to make everybody Hulks at some point now?
they'll probably have a handle on them by the future. They've gone through their Hulk mistakes.
Refined it.
Banner will have helped them figure it out, and they'll be fine by then.
Gotcha.
But what? Since you mentioned that, I did really the thought that informed for me, I guess, until you brought this up. Dr. Stubbs, what did he have there exactly? Like a handheld version of that he just happened to have?
It looked to me, and granted it was quick and I wasn't paying much attention until after, it looked to me like he just reprogrammed a phaser.
No, I mean, it makes sense you could potentially do something like that if they, as you said, if they had something like that ready to go. I mean, they can probably rig something like that up if they're wonderkind.
Worf was really wasted in this episode. His role was just to point out obvious threats, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a shame because sometimes he's so good. Other times he's background.
The thing that makes me wonder about how you can sustain things like this or properties like this when you have just so many different writers doing things. I mean, we forget that we say they, but it's,
and it's a large ensemble cast to serve.
Yeah.
You can't give 8 people a story every week. I mean, Friends really tried to do it with 6.5 an hour, but for the most part, you just can't give 8 leads a story every week. Oh, this is kind of random, but this might have been my favorite moment of the whole episode. Crusher's sitting at the bar in 10 Forward at the end, Dr. Crusher. And she's having a drink, and Guinan comes up, picks up her drink, and slides a coaster under it.
Oh, I didn't catch that. Awesome.
And then they just keep talking, and I'm like, man, Guinan's throwing some shade. That's some pretty passive-aggressive stuff.
Were those space mints on the bar?
Yes,
in front of her?
With space beer nuts.
Yeah.
I feel like Steven might not be a stranger to going to bars occasionally.
What?
Back
Have
when
you
I
been
used
to a bar, Steven?
Not as much lately.
Back when I used to do that fairly often, I would always feel pretty self-conscious unless I could find a coaster to put under my drinks. I mean, I don't know. Even just from a point of trying to be considerate, it's just I don't like the mess it makes just on my own table.
Well, I didn't really think it was super passive aggressive or anything. I just thought it was funny because she'd already been drinking, and then.
Well, no, it just made me think conversationally. It's sort of like, what kind of person are you when you go to do those things? Sort of things do you think about it? Does it bother you? I mean, Jimmy personally.
Not really.
Yeah, that's one of my little OCD things. Not that I have OCD necessarily, but just
If there's a coaster or a napkin there, or they give it to me, I have to use it.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
If it's there, use it.
Yeah.
My last note here, Dr. Crusher at the bar at the end, she's talking the whole episode about, I wish Wesley would get in trouble. Sociable. And then he comes in with a girl on his arm, and he's like, who's she? What do you know about her? And I was like, be careful what you wish for.
Yep.
Yeah. I love that last line. What do you know about this girl? It was delivered perfectly. The timing was perfect.
Yeah.
That I love that. That was the most real part of her whole, like, I'm worried about my son part. I just loved it.
That was I totally agree. That made that whole sub story for me. That arc, it just made it feel real enough, and was actually a good legitimate laugh line to end on.
Yeah, because I thought the same thing. Like, who is this girl?
Well, that girl was Amy O'Neill, who you may remember because she played the daughter in Honey, I Shrunk the Kid and Honey, I Blew Up the Kid.
Oh, yeah, I did see that, yeah. Although I've never seen either of those movies. But I've seen plenty of clips. But.
Oh, I saw the movies, but
they came out.
I saw the movies, loved them. It didn't seem like there were the video was close enough on her for me to even recognize who she was. I mean, I saw like a glimpse of her at the end. I was like, okay, that's just some girl.
Yeah, I only knew from checking out IMDb.
Yeah.
The other guest star we didn't mention yet was the nurse, who I kind of liked, even though she didn't have much to do. It was played by Mary McCusker. She doesn't have a lot of credits, but she's got some big ones. She was in The Client. She was in Turner and Hooch. She was in Slippers. But this is what she's third best known for, apparently.
Well, unless she has got 82 credits, she's a failure.
She does not have 82. It's like 37. I mean, Keith, you have more than 82 if you count individual episodes.
Oh,
right?
God.
Now that we've added Radio Hour to IMDb.
What, you did?
Yeah, they accept podcasts, but they look like a TV show. They haven't distinguished it, but they did say they welcome podcasts to be added now.
But anyway, I don't know if that would count as 82. I mean, it's like one show. So
No, yeah, it depends how you count it. 82 episodes of one show, I'd say most people count as one.
One credit.
Yeah.
I've noted, and this is just, I had just listened to our Dolphin episode. It just made me think, parents still don't understand. I think it's Crusher that says they've evolved. I was like, oh, she almost said it. And then Data said, they're going through an evolution. I'm like, yeah.
I totally missed it. They did
it. I don't know who says this. I thought it might have been Stubbs. The thought of it was sometimes people are just as they appear to be with no redemption at all. I wish I'd put more context with this note so I can remember it better. But you can search and try and figure out, well, why are they the way they are? And sometimes people are just that way. There's no silver lining. Some people are just that way, and they're just
okay. I can see that being about Stubbs for a couple of reasons.
Maybe that's what it was. But.
There was also, we haven't really talked that much about the conversations he had with Troy, and one of the things that he said to her was that you can scratch the surface, you can go all the way to the core of that person, you might just find nothing.
That's what it was. It was him saying that. Yeah, and that's what it made me think of. Yeah, that Elvis Costello from Miss Macbeth on the Spike album.
I don't know why I didn't have any notes about Stubbs and Troy, that scene, because that was a good scene.
It was, yeah. I didn't. Yeah. Well, I had that note, but I didn't remember it. So my one other note was, and we've kind of addressed this already, which is they relocate the nanites, and it's like, what? We're done here. Everybody's happy. But I think we all know that that's not the end of that story by any means.
But it is.
It's the end of this particular part of that story, but
well, it is the end of the story because we never revisit it in future track.
We
should, but we don't.
Unfortunate.
We're going to see the Borg Queen deliver that Captain Crusher line. It's going to save everything.
Maybe Discovery will visit that planet in season 3.
There you go.
I had a couple things. One of which I guess could be used as an alternate episode of sorts, like the Sousa thing. My note at the time had been it was like sort of like a fun demonstration of random behavior of the computer. When you have to do things like that, you have to say that, oh, this virus is doing all these crazy things, and it would be fun to just have an episode of just coming up with random things like that. I don't even know what it would be exactly, what that would look like, but that was they did a couple of things were all right. Something a little bit more demonstrative or effective than flashing the lights, as Jimmy was pointing out. But
didn't they say the nanites were trying to improve things, but they were trying to figure out how they needed to improve things?
I don't know if they were necessarily trying to improve so much as they were just looking around and poking at things, trying to figure out how it worked.
Okay. Because I thought it was very changeling, very STTMP, the motion picture.
About that ending with them dropping off the planet and the dusting off the hands, I didn't write exactly that, but yeah, certainly it came very close to feeling a little bit too neat, almost in the way that the child did.
Spiner did a great job. He came close to doing that kind of I am under control, but he didn't do that though.
Yeah,
he hinted towards that. I thought he did a really good job with that part. It wasn't a new thing, but what he did with it was he did a really good job with it.
Yeah,
I thought
definitely. I'm glad that they did it, but I'm just saying still, as far as it having worked out instead of just spectacularly backfiring or any number of other things, and then deciding to leave rather than having to force them out. They were like, we don't like it here. We want to go somewhere else. We don't need your help, but help us leave. It's like, okay.
And they said that planet was uninhabited, right? Was that?
I guess.
Yeah.
That too was convenient.
Probably just uninhabited with carbon-based life forms. There was probably some other kind of bizarre life form down there, like a black pool that could assume other forms. And they and the nanites are battling to this day.
or they was just
not this day, to what the day in the future.
Sure.
Or just that one continent was uninhabited.
Right. Yeah.
That would be a mistake then.
There's a city over there somewhere where there's that's the entire population with this colony.
Okay, let's get to the rankings.
All right.
Scale of 1 to 10, how annoying was Wesley?
I thought I was going to go higher because I think, Keith, you alluded to this early on. It was like, I see why people got annoyed with him, but I'm not annoyed with him.
Yeah. It's I think we're at a point where we're far enough away from it where you can see it's not his fault.
Yeah.
I mean, it's easy to go, they wrote him to do this or whatever, but
yeah, I give him a 2.5. So, I mean, I still found some of his stuff annoying this episode, but
2.5, very specific.
Yeah. I can't remember. Can we do halves?
Sure. We can do whatever we want to do.
Okay. 2.5.
I hadn't really thought to quantify it yet. I mean, I'm hovering around a 3, I guess. There's definitely something there. And it's really about his behavior was justifiable, but still he caused the problems. Mm-hmm. It took too long thinking that it could possibly he could have caused it, and then also took too long bringing it to somebody's attention. So, God, I actually am going to go with a 4 on that then.
Well, I have to up the percentage then. Hang on. I already calculated. I was giving him a 4 for the exact same reason as Keith, so there's no point in repeating. But yeah. So his score is a 3.5.
To what you were saying there, Keith, to go back to the idea at the beginning that it's an 80s movie, I almost think the episode would have been more interesting if it was we just follow Wesley and the other characters come in here and there. We hear about what they're up to, but it's really we follow Wesley, whether he's Ferris Bueller or whatever he is. It just would have been more interesting to look at it from to me, just follow his day rather than everybody else's.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. I mean, it's if it's a couple of things. One, it's like if you're going to do it, you might as well lean into it and just go for it and do it all the way. Yeah. The other is, I think there have been other more modern or contemporary series where they would do things like that and kind of play with that genre and just really follow that character. I feel like that's almost like a very Seth MacFarlane thing to do, like for say an American Dad or something.
Yeah.
You see an episode where they follow that character and just.
I agree. I think it would have been better if they'd done that. Who is your annoying character of the week?
Again, Keith kind of alluded early on when he mentioned Stubbs being very Commodore-like, and I wrote Commodore Stubbs. This is why annoying.
Keith, are you also going with Stubbs?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of have to.
No, I'm going with Worf.
because there wasn't enough of it.
Because he didn't do anything except point out the obvious threats.
Yeah,
and I like stuff.
If you think it through, you can see why the behavior was justifiable.
Sure.
They do these things for good reasons, but he was just a little too cocky in some places, and a little too Commodore-like in others, and that whole, I come here with the authority of this and blah blah blah. And if I were in his position, maybe I'd probably feel the same way. I don't know if I think you even said this too. Would I have done the same thing? Not necessarily, but I probably would have wanted to.
Crush of Trek.
This might be my most obscure one yet. It is girl in background in sick bay who had a sore arm. She had amazing hair. I was hoping she would come to the foreground. She had this amazing hair, and then she just kind of did like ooh, I hurt my elbow kind of thing. So she must have hurt her elbow. So that's why I wrote down was sore arm. Okay. But she was, again, I don't have a good reason because obviously she didn't have a lot of dialogue, but she was gorgeous. Great.
I wasn't paying close enough attention, honestly, like visually to even notice anybody. I mean, obviously they at the end they called out that there was the girl that Wesley was with, but again, I didn't really even see.
Yeah, pick somebody, Keith. You can pick the nanites. You can pick Stubbs. You don't have anybody to coast from last episode.
That was why I was really focused and really saw everybody.
I'm going to choose Annette, which was Wesley's date, even though that feels kind of wrong, but
sure,
there's a lack of options, so I'm going with it. I was going to choose the nanites, but they're real young, so didn't seem appropriate.
Same, I suppose. The justification, of course, being that we were all the same age then anyway.
I was younger. I was a kid.
Yeah.
And ranking the episode, obviously, we can make the obligatory jokes, but
it was just okay. It's number one.
Next week, we're going to watch The Ensigns of Command. After 111 years of silence, an extremely litigious alien race asserts its agreed-upon right to wipe out a Federation colony in its territory.
Litigious. All right. Well, I will have my lawyer hat on. Ready to go?
Data basically has to convince 15,000 people to evacuate their planet, and they don't want to.
Huh.
It's like they put a mask on.
It's like the volcano girl.
Well, anyway, glad to be back for season 3.
Yeah.
See you next week. Until then, live long.
Keep your nanites in their cage.
And perhaps prosper. I should have thought ahead. I should have been ready. I was not.
It's All Been Done presents
Who's Got the Time?